On May 28, 1940, inside Berlin's Reich Air Ministry, the intelligence report felt slick with disdain in Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring's hands as he finally set it down. You could almost hear the contempt in the silence. The document meticulously outlined President Roosevelt's appeal to Congress, a plea for a staggering, unheard-of surge in American aircraft production, the power to forge 50,000 planes each year. The Americans are truly desperate if they imagine such propaganda could ever frighten us, Göring announced to his assembled staff, his voice dripping with condescension. They grasp nothing of war production. Let them even try to reshape their automobile factories. They are about to learn that crafting warplanes demands something far greater than mere assembly lines. What Göring could not possibly perceive, what his ideology rendered him blind to, was that across the ocean in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already making his words obsolete. This former president of General Motors, now serving Roosevelt's cause as production chief for a symbolic $1 per year, was at that very moment setting in motion the most monumental industrial metamorphosis in the whole of human history. In the span of just 4 years, American factories would not only meet the impossible 50,000 aircraft figure that Göring had so arrogantly dismissed, they would nearly double it, producing almost 100,000 planes annually, all while sustaining 2 massive theaters of war across 2 different oceans. The very proclamation that had sparked this German derision was delivered on May 16, 1940, a day when German panzers were carving their way through France with terrifying speed. Standing before the United States Congress, Franklin Roosevelt made his historic declaration, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The response, even from allies, was a wave of disbelief. In 1939, after all, America had manufactured a mere 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps could only field 1,700 combat planes, a significant number of which were already outdated. And yet, against this reality, Roosevelt was demanding a 14-fold explosion in output. William Knudsen was destined to become the master architect of this American miracle. When presidential advisor Bernard Baruch was asked who could possibly deliver on such an impossible scale of production, his answer was a rhythmic insistence. First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen. Knudsen himself had walked away from a staggering $300,000 salary to dedicate his genius to his adopted country, skillfully transposing the proven principles of automotive mass production onto the intricate art of aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began instantly, a giant awakening from its slumber. By December of 1941, American factories were already generating 2,000 military aircraft every month, a 20-fold surge from the output just 2 years prior. The Ford Motor Company unveiled its audacious plans for a colossal bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing's facilities in Seattle began to swell and expand. Douglas Aircraft hired new workers by the thousands and then by the tens of thousands. The arsenal of democracy was stirring and its power was beginning to be felt. The Nazi leadership's casual dismissal of American capability was a toxic brew of racial arrogance and a stubborn, willful ignorance. General Friedrich von Boeticker, Germany's military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, had been sending meticulously accurate reports detailing the mobilization of American industry. His cable from December 1940 was a stark and urgent warning. American war production will ascend to unimaginable heights. Berlin, however, brushed these prescient warnings aside, labeling them as nothing more than defeatist exaggerations. When Boeticker had a personal meeting with Hitler in February 1939 to lay out America's potential, the Führer descended into a furious tirade about American racial decay instead of absorbing the critical intelligence assessments. Hitler dogmatically proclaimed that Americans, being half Judaized, half negrified, were utterly incapable of waging a sustained war. This profound ideological blindness would ultimately prove to be a fatal flaw. This deep-seated prejudice infected every layer of the German command structure. Luftwaffe intelligence saw reports of women flooding into aircraft factories not as a sign of strength, but as a clear signal of American desperation. They simply could not fathom that a democratic mobilization could ever surpass the output of a totalitarian command economy. When intelligence arrived detailing factories running 3 full shifts around the clock, German analysts simply assumed the numbers were wildly inflated. The Nazi worldview was a cage, and the reality of American potential simply could not fit inside it. Ford's Willow Run plant became the living embodiment of this American ambition. Rising from farmland with construction starting on April 18, 1941, it rapidly became the largest factory on Earth under a single roof. A sprawling 3.5 million square feet with an assembly line that stretched for a full mile. Charles Sorensen, Ford's legendary production chief, made a stunning promise to construct 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour, at a time when other factories struggled to produce 1 per day. The initial phase, however, was a near-total disaster. The very first bomber, painstakingly completed in September 1942, was so flawed it had to be completely rebuilt. Failures in quality control were rampant, reaching an astonishing 50%. By February of 1943, Willow Run was only managing to produce 56 bombers a month, a pathetic figure against the promise of hundreds. Critics mockingly renamed the plant Will It Run? But the engineers at Ford were relentless. They persevered, breaking down the B-24's daunting 193 individual parts into smaller, more manageable subassemblies. They invented and deployed hydraulic riveting tools, created prefabricated wiring harnesses, and perfected the moving assembly line for aircraft. They managed to incorporate 578 distinct design changes in 1943 alone, all without halting the relentless pace of production. And then, the miracle began to take shape. By September 1943, monthly production climbed to 148 bombers. By December, it hit 365. The true breakthrough, the moment that shattered all expectations, arrived in April 1944. In that month, Willow Run produced an unbelievable 428 B-24s, 1 bomber rolling off the line every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. This one single factory was now outproducing the entire German aviation industry combined. It was during the Tunisia campaign that German pilots first felt the chilling reality of American production superiority. Major Johannes Steinhoff, the commander of JG-77, made a sobering note in his diary in December 1942. The American pilots are no longer amateurs. What is most disturbing is that there are more of them every single day. This dawning revelation only intensified throughout 1943. January 27th saw the first American bombing raid on Germany itself, with 64 bombers striking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during the infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt, the Americans could suffer the loss of 60 B-17s and replace every single one of them within 2 weeks. The cold, hard mathematics of the war had become impossible to ignore. During Big Week, from February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces launched 3,500 bomber sorties directly against German aircraft production facilities. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 of its fighters, but far more devastating was the loss of approximately 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland had to report to Göring that Germany was losing 200 fighters each month while only managing to produce 1,000. America, in stark contrast, was producing 2,500 fighters monthly while losing only 400. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's most celebrated aces with 220 victories, vividly described a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber stream stretched from one horizon to the other, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, the scale of American aircraft production had reached truly mind-boggling proportions. In that single year, American factories produced 96,270 aircraft, which included 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. This output from a single year surpassed Germany's entire wartime production of approximately 94,077 aircraft. Yet the disparity was about more than just numbers. Every American bomber bristled with 1350 caliber machine guns fed by thousands of rounds of ammunition. German fighters, in contrast, were increasingly taking off with only partial ammunition loads. American bombers were equipped with powered gun turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation systems. German fighters often lacked even a functioning radio. Boeing's Seattle Plant 2 was churning out 16 B-17s every day by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, a company that had employed a mere 68 people in 1936, had swelled to a workforce of 167,000 spread across 9 massive facilities. North American Aviation was rolling out 500 P-51 Mustangs every month. Lockheed achieved the incredible rate of 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, all while successfully implementing 2,127 combat-driven design modifications. The supporting industries kept pace with this furious rhythm. General Motors produced 57,758 aircraft engines under license. Packard built 55,523 of the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Alcoa's aluminum production surged by 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium output skyrocketed from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. The very transformation of America's workforce completely shattered Nazi preconceptions. Women, who made up less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, constituted a staggering 65% of the workforce by 1943. That's 10,000 women building the planes that would win the war. At the Douglas plant in Long Beach, 22,038 out of 41,062 employees were women. Rose Will Monroe, the real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with a near-perfect 99.5% accuracy rate. Women inspectors at Douglas caused defect rates to plummet from 3.2% to a mere 0.3%. Ford even redesigned tools to better fit smaller hands, a move that inadvertently improved efficiency for everyone. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced worker fatigue, while better designed workstations led to a sharp decrease in injuries. German intelligence stubbornly misinterpreted this influx of female labor as a sign of desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these women workers as temporary, confidently predicting an imminent collapse in quality. Instead, precision and quality actually improved. Women proved to excel at detailed and intricate work, wiring, instruments, and inspection. Their integration into the workforce was a demonstration of democratic strength, not a symptom of weakness. As American production soared to impossible heights, Germany began its retreat into a world of fantasy. Göring authorized the Jägerstab program in February 1944, a desperate plan to disperse aircraft production into 729 underground facilities, all operated with slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone used 60,000 prisoners under the most horrific conditions imaginable, leading to the deaths of 20,000 people. These subterranean factories produced more defects than they did aircraft. The slave laborers, with nothing left to lose, actively sabotaged components. The logistics of moving parts between these dispersed facilities created a single plant in Chicago. Meanwhile, American innovation was only accelerating. Boeing developed a modular construction method for the B-29 Superfortress, building sections across 4 different facilities with parts that were completely interchangeable. The pressurized B-29, costing $605,000 each, incorporated advanced technology that Germany couldn't even replicate in its prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 of these advanced B-29s every single month. June 6, 1944 D-Day stands as the ultimate testament to the culmination of American industrial might. The invasion force utilized 11,590 Allied aircraft against a meager 319 German sorties, a staggering 36-to-1 superiority in the air. This wasn't merely a tactical advantage. It was industrial annihilation. In the preparatory phase between January and May 1944, Allied bombing raids dropped 195,000 tons of bombs on German targets, a weight exceeding all the bombs Germany had dropped on Britain throughout the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 entire airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany had ever possessed in its entire transport fleet. By December 1944, a single American raid would involve 1,200 heavy bombers escorted by 900 fighters. The P-51 Mustang now had the range to fly to Poland and back, the performance to outmatch any opponent, and it existed in such vast quantities that individual losses were strategically irrelevant. German pilots began calling them Indians because they seemed to swarm everywhere at once. As the certainty of defeat loomed, even the highest echelons of Nazi leadership were forced to acknowledge the production catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels confided to his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem like criminal delusions. We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with nothing but rhetoric." Rommel told his staff just before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler himself finally admitted to Albert Speer in January 1945, "We should have listened to Bodeker's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Albert Speer would later testify that American bombing had reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated with unequivocal certainty, "The American attacks, which followed a definite system of assault on industrial targets, caused the breakdown of German armaments. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, which became operational in mid-1944, represented a genuine technological leap. It was 100 Bapi faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring clung to the belief that this wonder weapon could single-handedly restore air superiority, despite the crushing numerical inferiority. But Germany managed to produce only 1,430 Me-262s in total, and there were never more than 200 operational at any given time. Their revolutionary engines required a complete overhaul after just 10 hours of flight. Critical materials were simply unavailable, forcing the use of inferior substitutes. America, meanwhile, had quietly begun its own jet development program back in 1942. While the Bell P-59 proved inferior to the German jets, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, a fighter superior to any German jet, was already entering production before the war's end. This was the true nature of American power, an industrial depth that allowed for the simultaneous pursuit of multiple advanced technologies, a luxury that Germany, for all its scientific brilliance, simply could not afford. The contrast perfectly epitomized the outcome of the production war. Germany's technological edge in jet aircraft meant absolutely nothing when faced with America's ability to produce thousands upon thousands of high-performance conventional fighters, all while developing the next generation of aircraft at the same time. Quality without quantity proved to be worthless in a total war. The arrest of Hermann Göring on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his forced confrontation with this reality. At the interrogation facility in Augsburg, he was initially defiant, insisting that German technology had been superior, overcome only by sheer brute numbers. His subsequent transfer to Camp Aschken in Luxembourg, the dedicated facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought with it a period of intense interrogation. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted a series of extensive interviews that documented Göring's slow, dawning recognition of America's industrial supremacy. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring finally admitted to Heckler, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at its peak. It was incomprehensible." He expressed a particular sense of awe at American logistics. Your ability to supply forces across two oceans while simultaneously maintaining domestic production, this was beyond our conception. We couldn't adequately supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied entire armies 5,000 miles from America. During his trial at Nuremberg, prosecutors confronted Göring with the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of American production superiority. Charts vividly displayed America producing more aircraft every month by 1944 than Germany had managed in an entire year. Films of the Willow Run assembly lines played in the courtroom as prosecutors read aloud the names of German cities that had been systematically destroyed by bombers built in that one factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946, laid bare his struggle to grasp the sheer scale of it all. I believe the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great, particularly the Air Force, but I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible. Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's obsessive fixation on the production statistics. He would repeatedly calculate the ratios, comparing single American factories to the entirety of German production. He seemed especially fixated on Willow Run, calling it that damned factory that broke our backs. When he was shown the final figures, that America had produced 312 615 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the numbers in a profound, defeated silence. The mathematical reality of their defeat had become undeniable. The sheer scope of this transformation remains staggering even today. From a mere 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, America produced a colossal 5,159 by the war's end, including 97 8-10 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other types. This achievement represented not just a victory of quantity, but a systemic superiority in every conceivable aspect of production. At its peak, 2 million Americans were working in aircraft production, a workforce of unprecedented diversity. It included women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and even elderly citizens. This was a democratic mobilization that achieved what totalitarian command never could. It was voluntary cooperation that surpassed the output of forced labor by every single metric. The very workforce that had entered the factories in 1941 knowing nothing about aircraft emerged in 1945 as the most skilled and experienced aviation workers in the world. They didn't just build planes, they revolutionized the very concept of manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control, a system developed for bomber production, became the standard industrial practice across the globe. The principles of automation that were pioneered at Willow Run would go on to transform global manufacturing forever. The same engineers who designed the assembly lines for bombers would later design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s would raise the children who would one day walk on the moon. This production miracle did not end with victory. It launched the American century. The financial dimensions of this effort defied all conventional economic orthodoxy. Aircraft production alone consumed $45 billion in 1940s dollars, which is equivalent to over $800 billion today. The B-29 program by itself cost more than the Manhattan Project. And yet, rather than bankrupting America, this massive war production created an era of unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, the scourge that had plagued the nation during the Depression, completely vanished. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond sales, purchased by the workers themselves, financed a significant portion of this expansion. The workers at Willow Run alone purchased $45 million in bonds, effectively funding the operations of their own factory. Germany, conversely, was forced to dedicate 40% of its entire industrial capacity to aircraft production by 1944, yet it still produced less than half of the American output. Slave labor, upon which the Nazis increasingly relied, proved to be catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was endemic, quality collapsed. The productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943, while American productivity surged by 300%. The vast production infrastructure that was built for war became the very foundation for post-war prosperity. The aluminum smelters built for bombers would produce the materials for suburban housing. The chemical plants that made aviation fuel would create the plastics for consumer goods. The machine tool factories that equipped the aircraft plants would go on to tool up American industry for decades of global dominance. Beyond the raw production numbers lay an incredible organizational excellence. The War Production Board seamlessly coordinated the efforts of 184,000 different companies. IBM punch card machines were used to track millions of individual components across thousands of suppliers. MIT's radiation laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed the navigation systems that gave American bombers an all-weather capability, a decisive advantage. When combat experience revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing designed and added chin turrets within 60 days. When operations in the Pacific demanded planes with longer range, consolidated modified B-24s on the fly without ever stopping a production. In Germany, such modifications took months or even years. In America, improvements took weeks. This incredible adaptability proved to be just as decisive as the sheer volume of production. American aircraft were in a state of continuous evolution, constantly being improved based on real-time combat experience from around the globe. Information flowed from battles in the Pacific to the production lines on the Atlantic coast within days. German aircraft, produced in isolated underground facilities by demoralized slave labor, remained static, while American designs improved on a weekly basis. The feedback loop between the battlefield and the factory floor achieved an unprecedented level of efficiency. A pilot's observations would reach an engineer almost immediately. The engineer's solution would be on the assembly line within days. A suggestion from an assembly line worker could reach the designers directly. This democratic free flow of information proved to be immeasurably superior to Germany's rigid, hierarchical command structure. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he made his most complete and candid admission of the production war's significance. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under a mountain of aluminum and steel. His last recorded statement to the psychologist Gilbert was equally revealing. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized production itself. Every aspect of their system proved superior to ours. Göring committed suicide that night, but his final testimony stands as history's ultimate verdict on the production war. The Reichsmarschall, who had once sneered at American capabilities, died with the certain knowledge that a single American factory had exceeded the lifetime production of his entire Air Force. Military historians widely consider the American production achievement to be the single most decisive factor in the Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been impossible, the strategic bombing campaign would have been unsustainable, and the war in the Pacific would have been unwinnable. Richard Overy, the preeminent historian of the air war, concluded, "The outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the sheer weight of material. The Allies won because they literally buried their enemies under an avalanche of production." The numbers support this assessment absolutely. By 1944, America alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world, Axis and Allied, combined. This was not an incremental superiority. It was a dominance of an entirely different order of magnitude. Germany faced not just defeat, but total obliteration. And yet, the significance of this production miracle transcended mere military victory. It was a profound demonstration of democracy's superiority to dictatorship, of freedom's inherent advantage over tyranny, of the incredible strength of voluntary cooperation over forced obedience. The workers who achieved this transformation were not slaves or conscripts. They were free citizens, united in a common and righteous purpose. Hermann Göring's arrogant dismissal of American production capacity stands as one of history's most catastrophic miscalculations. His contempt for democratic industrial potential cost Germany the war and cost the world millions of lives. His abject failure to recognize American capabilities sealed the fate of the Third Reich long before the first American bomber ever reached German skies. The transformation from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually was a powerful demonstration that free societies, when faced with an existential threat, could achieve the impossible. American workers didn't just meet Roosevelt's impossible goal, they doubled it. They didn't just match German production, they exceeded it fivefold, all while simultaneously fighting another massive war in the Pacific. Leaders in the present day would do well to remember Göring's fatal mistake, dismissing democratic nations as weak simply because they are peaceful, or underestimating the productive capacity of a free people because they prefer prosperity to conquest, is to invite a catastrophic miscalculation. America in 1940 appeared utterly unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as front lines, that assembly workers could be as crucial as soldiers, and that industrial mobilization could determine the outcome of a war as surely as military strategy. Göring learned this lesson far too late, at the cost of his nation's utter destruction. From his dismissive sneer at Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's personal journey traced the exact arc of Nazi Germany's destruction. His contempt for American production became the epitaph for the Third Reich itself, a regime that confused its own ideology with actual capability, that mistook tyranny for strength, and that foolishly believed its racial mythology could somehow overcome the cold, hard laws of industrial mathematics. The Reichsmarschall, who dismissed American aircraft production, died knowing that American factories had produced more planes in 1944 alone than Germany had managed to build throughout the entire war. His mockery of democratic industrial capacity became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total and unconditional defeat. America produced 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the real victory was not in the numbers, but in the method. It was the proof that free workers could outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation could exceed totalitarian command, and that a nation of immigrants and diverse citizens could unite to achieve the impossible. The B-24 bombers rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes were not just aircraft. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet was driven by a woman who had been a housewife only months earlier. Each engine was built by a teenager who had left high school to serve his country. Each wing was assembled by workers who had fled poverty and discrimination. All of them proved that free people, when united in a righteous cause, could bury tyranny under an avalanche of production. Hermann Göring laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 planes a year. America responded by producing twice that many, transforming global history in the process. His laughter now echoes through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation, the fatal dismissal of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither democracy nor production. In the end, both buried him and everything he represented under a sky filled with 300,000 aircraft, turning his contempt into history's most complete and devastating defeat.